clear for test point 4A.
Copy. Accelerating. On condition.
Clear to maneuver.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to this edition of On Condition. I'm your host, Art Tomasetti. Now, we ended 2025 with a bit of a cliffhanger, kind of reminiscent of the old Batman TV series of the 1960s. I was talking with my friend, retired Lieutenant General Mark Wise, call sign Notso, about a harrowing experience he had on his sailboat, the Endeavour. Now, if you missed it, you definitely want to go back and watch that episode or listen to that episode. But here's a quick recap. Notso and his crew set out from Florida on a trip up the east coast of the United States. On the second night, they encounter severe weather. They turn towards shore, and suddenly, a flash of light, a loud clap of thunder, and suddenly everything goes dark. Now, Notso and his fearless crew find themselves miles offshore in a thunderstorm on a sailboat with no power. I mean, holy Gilligan's Island, Batman. That is edge of your seat kind of stuff, right? I mean, can you imagine being on a boat, getting tossed around in the thunderstorm, miles from safety, in the dark? Frightening. Wow. Oh, so you're probably wondering how things turned out, right? Well, let's listen in and find out.
When the lightning hit and killed all the electronics, it disengaged the autopilot to the rudder, and one of the crew members started to turn the wheel because he saw a little motion in the magnetic compass, and it started to spin faster, and went to turn the wheel again. And that's about the time I said, I got the boat, because there's a very counterintuitive thing that happens. When the magnetic compass starts to spin, the tendency is to turn against the spin to stop it. That's not actually the case. It makes it go faster. Because you actually want to turn in the direction of spin, and that's actually the opposite to the spin.
Right.
So I take the helm at that point, because now what's happened is we're hard over doing circles inside this thunderstorm while more lightning's going off, and it's a scene out of a horror story, pretty much. And here's the beautiful part: not one person freaked out. I took the helm. I started doing my thing. I had two crew members. They started taking on their duties. Nobody was amped. Nobody was, emotionally distraught, I could tell anyway.
Yeah.
And so I got control of the helm. I got the heading under control, and we exited the storm probably 15 minutes later. In that time, one of the crew members started searching for a cell signal. So we're now maybe 7 miles off the coast. He gets a cell signal, call 911, Sheriff's Department and the Coast Guard start to track us. The other crew member, who's an aeronautical engineer, who's still in the storm, leaves the helm, goes into both engine bays to verify one engine's not working, figures out in the other engine bay how to remove the brackets, and this is all in the storm, remove the brackets around the throttle cable so he could start moving the throttle cable should I need to control the throttle, manually, voice.
Right.
All of this is happening in this chaotic environment. But once we start talking to 911 and they start tracking us and they've got a positive ID, we find the lighthouse that marks the channel. I get a signal enough to bring Navionics up on the phone and verify our position. And then we get a good bearing back into the channel. We tell them we can get it in the channel. Once we enter the channel, the Sheriff's Department actually meets us with one of their boats. Doesn't want to tow us because of liability, but I quickly inform them that I have no control over the throttle, and it's either on or it's off. So we starve the throttle about halfway into the channel. They acquiesce, tie up alongside us, and nudge us into a shallow spot where we can manually release the clutch, drop the anchor. And remember, an anchor on a boat this size, the anchor itself is 88 pounds.
Right.
The rest of the chain is just amplifying that. And so we're manually pulling this out to get the anchor down and set. And then all of a sudden, it's quiet, everyone's safe, and we start exploring the boat. And what we discovered was, aside from pretty much all things electronic not working, the lightning appeared to have traveled in through the mast into the starboard hull, because what we found when we went into the starboard hull was a mess because it hit the fuel tank on the starboard side. And what that did is it's diesel, so it didn't explode, right? But what happened, we think there was probably some moisture in the tank, which you put a couple million volts through that. You basically overpressure it in about a split second. So this aluminum tank now expands like a balloon. And then when it expands like a balloon, nothing around it fits any longer. So it fractures all the stringers around it. It fractures the floor and pushes it up. It blows the two floor panels into two different staterooms. And those floor panels are heavy for a reason. So imagine the force it takes to blow those things in a distance, going through the doors, gouging the doors on the way through, and landing in two different staterooms. I'm just fortunate nobody was down there, because that could have been a life-altering event. But they actually say the safest place to be on a sailboat after a lightning strike or during a lightning storm is around the helm.
Right.
So anyway, that is my story.
So when I first read that, I'm not a sailing person. I go on cruise ships. I go out here locally in the Panhandle area of Florida on a pontoon boat every now and again. But I was just, oh my goodness, right? But I also thought about, wow, I remember this time in an airplane where some bad weather, kind of situation happened. And I started thinking about the connection between, hey, how we handle situations like that in flight and how you described how things played out in that scenario on the boat. So connect the dots for us a little bit. What do you think from your aviation background played into that? And even for the crew, who you mentioned one was an aeronautical engineer, but even their backgrounds played into how things actually worked out for you all that night.
Oh, great question. And I've thought about it about a million times or more. But I would say, Turbo, everything had to do with aviation and our training. Everything. And I'll walk you through a couple pieces of it. But important to note that the two other guest crew members, one was a retired F-18 pilot, Marine.
Right.
One was a Marine maintenance officer. So you got two guys that are used to being in high stress environments and are used to, divvying up duties and everyone going to work, doing what they need to do when the conditions are absolutely unfavorable, we'll say.
Sure.
Chaotic is probably a better word. But, from the very beginning, it was absolutely, in a way, it was textbook for what we would do. So when we take fighters and attack aircraft across oceans, we're looking at diverts. We're always looking at the weather. We're updating the weather. We're deciding where we're going to take it if something goes wrong at any given moment. That's essentially what I was doing that first night. And really a lot more than just the first night. It's just the night I made a decision from it. And so it was a matter of, okay, where's my divert? What's the weather doing? Okay, that weather's not going to work. I'm going to go to this place. What's the weather doing there? And then monitoring conditions and then making follow-up decisions based on the conditions that are evolving at the time.
Right.
And that was the first big thing that struck me is it was really exactly out of what you do when you're crossing an ocean. I think the other thing is that, when the stress level starts to raise, when you have a catastrophic event that's either happening or, about to happen, or it could happen, for a lot of folks, that stress level goes up. And it's not that it doesn't for, your military fighter community or test community or anybody who does aviation for a living. It's, you don't, you have the stress, you just know where to compartmentalize it until it's appropriate to do it, to deal with it, right? And that's really what I think kept everyone calm is, yeah, conditions were horrible. Yes, we couldn't see where we were going. Yes, a lot of bad things happened. We still got a mission. And so everyone put the emotion aside, and literally no voices raised, no no screaming, no nothing. It was just like boom, boom, boom. Let's get this done and let's get it to safety. And I suppose the last thing I would mention is, you as the pilot in command, or in this case as the captain, and this is not the only time I've observed this particular piece, but in a lot of ways, it's just like what you do in your career. You are the one responsible for maintaining calm, direction, making sure everyone knows what's going on, and keeping everyone informed and knowledgeable about what direction you could potentially go. I think that that's ingrained into us throughout our career, and especially over a very long career where we do it over and over and refine it. It's not something you think about doing. It's part of your DNA now, right? It's part of how you approach every problem. And I certainly saw it that night. I've seen it many times, but it's a wonderful piece of one of the incredible things you take away from the training we all have.
Right. So in this podcast, I've often talked about risk analysis, risk mitigation, hazard analysis, hazard mitigation. And usually from the flight test perspective, we're thinking about that in the sort of pre-flight time domain. In our test planning process, we're going to look at all the hazards, identify the ones we want to talk about or think about or do something about, and then we're going to go put mitigations in place. One of the things you mentioned in your story was having that conversation about the magnetic compass right before everything went dark. And so that was real-time risk mitigation. So in the moment, you are analyzing as the events and the circumstances around you are changing. Thoughts on that real-time risk analysis piece?
Yeah, no, very, very well caught. So two things there. One, just from a factual standpoint, part of what we do when we evolve in our careers is it goes into our risk analysis over time is we become hyper aware of the condition of the vessel we're going out in, whether it's a test vessel, whether it is, you name the sailboat or airplane. But in this case, we just come out of a refit. So I knew there were some things that I had noticed already that weren't quite right. Like, for instance, the depth reading was not exactly accurate. It had to be calibrated, which we actually did before we left. But the other thing I had noticed was the magnetic compass had not been calibrated. It was probably 11, 12 degrees off, which is significant.
Sure.
And in a lot of these navigational systems, like particularly on a boat, your chart plotter, though you can have it in magnetic quite often, and I do as well, I do it in true, right? I know what the magnetic is, I know what the variation is, but I do it in true because all the charts are in true. And I've got a moving map essentially in front of me. And so everything is easy to just keep it in true, because really magnetic does have its place, but it probably, the percentage of time it's more useful is smaller than the time that true is useful. So my brain was bringing in there's some things that are not right, some things that are going to affect this. The magnetic compass is the only thing we've got. And I know for a fact it's not going to be accurate if anybody looks at the chart plotter and says the true course to safety is this. Well, you can't just add or subtract the magnetic variation and then say, well, then therefore our magnetic heading is this. I'm like, everyone look at this piece of gear. This heading that's on this piece of gear right now is the only heading that matters. Everyone good? So, but that's part of how we go through this risk mitigation when we're, assessing the state of our craft.
Sure. All right. So on that, let's now go and broaden the perspective a little bit. So from your time as a first lieutenant, going through flight school, getting into F-18s, all the way up through the end of your Marine Corps career as a Deputy Commandant for Aviation. How did you view aviation safety personally, and maybe even from a broader perspective from the outside looking down? How did you see it from your vantage point at those different bookends of your career?
That is a great question. Another one. I would say when I started as a young guy, you're trying to kind of make sense of what's important, right? And because that's how you develop, you kind of glom onto the things that you think are important and you let some of the other things go. And I don't think I'm alone in this, but early in the career, the safety guy was the guy that got tagged with the duties that nobody wanted to hear about, right? Because it meant somehow that the fun factor wouldn't be there, or we wouldn't be able to do the things we thought were necessary to fight the airplane, whatever. But because that was in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And so there was this view that, the safety stink getting caught on you. But I watched that and was a part of it as I got older. It evolved significantly through the course of my career. It went from, getting the safety stink and I don't want to be the safety officer to the safety officer as one of the primary department heads, to, when we started doing ORM forms and signing off on all the conditions that needed to be met before you went to launch a mission to ensure to the best of your ability that it would be successful, the safety officer's role in that to the CO. So it became ever more important. And I think the thing that really clicked in my mind through this evolution was towards the end that, how do you balance safety and operational effectiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because really they have to be tied together. Because the problem is, and we always used to say this, at least in the middle part, is, hey, we can be really, really safe. We can have 100% safety record by not launching any of the airplanes.
Right. Yeah, of course.
And so how do you balance that so that you can do things? Because really what it amounts to is being smart about it, knowing your system's cold, knowing when to take risk and not to take risk. So there's this balance, this interlocked piece between safety and operations that they're the same. They have to be the same. And so getting your mind locked around that is important. And honestly, it did have an effect on one aspect of this particular outing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind, I'll just hit that real quick. When you go through weather forecast in a marine weather forecast, it's really pumping out a ton of data.
Right.
One of those data lines is what they call a CAPE value. And a CAPE value is basically, as I know it, is the energy in the air. In other words, the potential that you're going to get the formation of electrical activity out there.
Okay.
So the reason this is important is as you look along your route and what they're forecasting, everything from, swell height to swell periodicity to CAPE value to vertical slamming, and all of these are terms about the comfort of the ride and the safety of the ride. But the CAPE value during a winter month is probably going to be pretty low. It goes to about 5,000 on the top end. So you're probably going to see it in the 1,000, 15, maybe low. As you get into the summer months, you're going to regularly see it tagged between 28 and 4,500-ish, and you know that your value is way up there. So from the safety perspective, if it's forecasting, it doesn't mean it's going to be a high value all the way through your course.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, if you're in a sailboat, it's going to take you a while to make it through that course. So what is that value going to change to over time? So in other words, do you start and go, well, I got a high value, I'm not going at all because I could see a lightning storm form? Well, guess what? We're in summer on the East Coast of the United States. That's probably going to happen no matter what. So do you never go, or do you make risk decisions and then know that you're going to have to make follow-on decisions based on how these things form, grow, or fall? So I think it's all kind of the the same as our safety discussion.
Absolutely. All right. So now, I give everybody a chance as we close out our talk to share with the audience, the retired Lieutenant General Mark Wise or Notso or captain of and I'm sorry, what's the name of your vessel?
Endeavour.
Captain of the
OUR as in the HMS Endeavour and Space Shuttle Endeavour exploration.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So as captain of the Endeavour, words of wisdom, words to live by, parting thoughts for our audience.
Yes. Have fun. Always have fun. Be prepared. Don't be afraid to make the tough call, and don't wait to make the tough call. And then back to have fun. That means make sure your crew has fun. Because that's the things we do all rely around that. Don't let it escape you. Just be prepared in the background. It's all good.
Great words to live by. All right, Notso, thank you once again for taking the time out and for sharing your story with us. And I think I can speak for most of the people who will be listening to this. Once the Endeavour is back in the water, we wish you fair winds and following seas in that vessel. And if you're game for it, I think maybe we can look to get together for another podcast episode in the future, because I know there's more stories you have to share with us that would be of great value to our listeners.
I'd love to, Turbo. I'd love to get you guys out there on the boat. She's, like I said, she's a big girl, lots of room, lots of fun.
Yeah. Well, if you find yourself in the Gulf at all near our way, let me know and we'll come meet you.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks again, Notso.
Thanks, Turbo. Really enjoyed it.
As I mentioned in the interview, when I first heard Notso's story, I thought it was a perfect example of how the things we learn in aviation that keep us safe, that minimize risk, and allow us to survive crises have broader application in other facets of life. And some of those things are pretty straightforward. And one of my favorite books is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And if you've read that book, you know what they tell you, that imprinted on the guide for interstellar travelers are the words, "Don't panic." Easy to understand, though not always easy to apply, but essential. I look forward to having Notso back on a future episode of the podcast to share more of his insight. Well, that'll wrap us up for this month. Until next time, be safe, be smart, and be ready to be on condition.
On Condition is brought to you by Time to Climb. Motivate your team to succeed, accelerate toward your goals, and elevate to a higher level of performance. On the web at www.time2climb.com.